Great, thank you very much. I'm super happy to be here. I must say though, when I booked the time, I was not thinking about the time change. So I feel like I'm presenting in the middle of the night, but it's all good. It's 7 a.m. here. But I would much sooner rather be in Halifax talking with you. It's so much easier, but this is what we do for now. And it seems to be a good way to reach across the country and share with each other. I am coming from the University of Winnipeg. I will kind of start sharing my screen here and give you a peek of kind of where I'm going today. In terms of our time together, I know it's really hard to sit and just listen to someone present and perhaps, you know, not have that interaction with the person presenting. But I'm going to try to do some breakout rooms with you. So I'm going to give you advance warning of that right now. And also try to give you a couple of times where you can, in those breakout rooms, talk with each other or do a little activity. So if anybody knows sort of the work that I do, I've done lots of research, for the past 15 years or so. And primarily with children who are refugees, both living in Canada and children who are living in conflict areas. I tend to do my research, but try to make use of it. And so I'll tell you a little bit just about me. Before I came to the university setting or environment, I like to joke that I had a real job before I came to the university because I was a classroom teacher. I was in the K-12 system for 18 years as both a teacher and a counselor. And so my work really was, propelled by the work that, the research work was propelled by the work that I was doing in the schools. When I was working as a school counselor, around 2004, we started to see increasing numbers of students coming from areas of conflict and students who had refugee backgrounds. And to be quite honest, at the time, the government had done a bit of a survey report. And at the time, 80% of the teachers felt like they were ill-equipped to deal with the needs of the students and feeling like, students were dropping out or being pushed out of the system. And as a counselor at the time, we started to see students presenting in classrooms with some pretty high social emotional needs, mental health needs, trauma needs. And really at the time, I recall talking with some of my colleagues as president of the counselors at the time, and they were experiencing similar concerns and issues with students and really high levels of hurt and kids suffering from the effects of violence and trauma again, and not really knowing what we should be doing. And so that really was the start of my work. It really was, let's figure out what are their educational needs and their psychosocial issues that are affecting them. And then as teachers or counselors, what do we do? How do we support them? And so what I've really tried to do in all of the work I've done is get back to my practitioner roots, because that's what I know and love, is try to make sense of this theory or make sense of the research that we're doing. And try to give teachers and counselors and resource teachers and EAL consultants and settlement workers some strategies for helping kids and for helping families to work through some of their issues. And I don't like to think that, this is a fix-it session. It's just suggestions. It's really just, these are things we can try. And as I've been presenting basically all over, in the United States and Canada, in post-conflict areas, we learn from each other and we really share ideas. And I learn how it can be adapted to be more culturally responsive, how we need to change the way we do things to be more trauma-informed. And so really, every time I present and do workshops for teachers, I gather more information and we learn together, and people will maybe send me some ideas about how they've implemented certain things. So today, what I'm trying to do is I'm going to breeze through, some of the work that I've done, some of the research programs, because it really led to the different activities. And then we're going to try some of those activities. And my full disclosure here, I haven't done breakout rooms on my own. I've been part of them, but I haven't really watched the magic happen from behind the scenes. So We will have Chris help us, who will help navigate the setting of the rooms. And then I have a little bit of a, discussion questions or an activity. And some of those activities are in the books that I have published as well. And I'll walk you through that, this morning and do my best to kind of cover as much ground as possible. This is sort of the overview for what I want to do. I'm hoping that we can get through most of this, really kind of taking a look at refugee movements and noting some important numbers and some important issues that are arising around the world. The context of the refugee experience, what does that really mean, and what are some of the experiences that students have had, and then pulling into sort of the social and emotional needs of refugees, and then also, specific mental health and trauma issues, and also some strategies for building trauma-sensitive spaces. Now, I think some of these strategies and recommendations, that could take us all week. So, I think when we originally developed it, we were thinking of activities to do with teachers to really help to build capacity in this area. And, I think we came up with about 30 different lessons. And for students, we came up with 90 or so, and they could all be adapted and changed to meet the needs of the specific groups. So I'll walk you through some of that, but we won't be able to do all 90. But a little bit of a taste of sort of where we went with some of the work that we have done. So I think one slide I always start with my presentations is this UNHCR figures at a glance. This number, 82.4 million, are forcibly displaced right now, and almost every single time. Now, I just did another presentation about 3 weeks ago. For this is one of the first times I haven't had to update this number. So sadly, I'm always updating this 82.4 million number. And when I first started, the number was 37. It was around 32, 37 when I first started presenting, which was around 2004 on this work. So you can see this number is growing yearly and sometimes monthly. And as there's conflicts in the world or a natural disaster or political turmoil, this number fluctuates. And so it's a number to pay attention to. But the numbers at the bottom, the numbers of people who are internally displaced within their, they can't live in their homes, but they're living in, IDP camps, internally displaced people's camps. And I am doing work right now we haven't been able to go back because of the pandemic, because of COVID-19, but our plan is to go back next year in 2022, to go back to the camp in South Sudan. We were doing some work, some trauma healing workshops in a northern area it's about a 2-hour plane ride up from Juba, which is the main city in South Sudan. In a community called WOW. And this is an internally displaced camp that really is a church and a surrounding area with a bunch of, tents, and people are pretty crowded and living in this area, because if they leave, they will be killed, because there's so much tribal conflict and tribal, conflict within groups. They don't feel safe to leave. So in this small area that would be suitable for 5,000 people, there's about 80,000 people just crammed into the area. So again, they are in their country, but they can't be living in their community, and they can't be living in their homes. And the other number I really want to draw your attention to is the number of refugees, because again, people are living in situations where there's protracted conflict. They have been in refugee camps for most, if not all of their lives, a significant portion of their lives, and seeking a better life, and really with not a lot of mobility or ability to move from their current situation. So kind of at the I guess whim of countries who are willing to sponsor refugees, there's little opportunity for them to have a better life. I think if we take a look at this, this UNHCR illustration, you can also see the countries where many of the refugees are coming from. Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Myanmar. You can see that most of these areas are areas where there is, significant conflict or turmoil at this time anyway. Turkey is hosting a significant number of refugees, as is Lebanon and Jordan. Colombia, Pakistan, Uganda, and Germany. Of course, many of the South Sudanese have moved across from South Sudan into Uganda because of the close proximity. And then just looking at, the numbers here, about 1 in 6 are displaced, just to get an idea about where people are, the Venezuelans, and see the numbers there. 35 million are children. So an estimated 35 million, which means 42% of that 82.4 million are children under the age of 18. And 1 million have been born as refugees. So this is really of importance for us as teachers and educators or consultants or people who are working with refugees, just to understand the sheer numbers that we are talking about. And you can see between 2018 and 2020, an average of between 290,000 and 340,000 children were born into a refugee life every year. So again, just thinking of what that actually means and the numbers that represents. Again, taking a look at displacement situations by country of origin, again, just looking at sort of the top 10 here to give you an idea of the numbers of refugees or asylum seekers. Now, this is sort of my overview of some of the research programs that I've been working on. The first one, I think is actually the most prevalent for us as teachers, because it really talks about sort of the challenges that we're facing. And I'd love to tell you that, the challenges are gone, and, we've, addressed these over the past 15 years, that we have, really made gains, and we have in certain areas, and there's been a lot of work and research and programs that have popped up to support refugees and children affected by war who are now living in Canada, but we got a long way to go. And we still have lots of room to support. And the last couple of years have been particularly difficult because our energy and our focus have been pointed other ways. But that is exacerbated for many of the people who are new to the country, who are living as refugees. And I'm working right now with a community women's group called the Women for Women of South Sudan. And there's a chapter in BC and there's a chapter in Winnipeg. And I work very closely with the president, Elizabeth Aluk. And her and I were the ones who were doing the trauma training in South Sudan. And we've kind of turned our focus to supporting people within Canada because we can't travel. So we're doing trauma healing workshops. It's called the Women's Circle. And we get women together on a Saturday through Zoom. And we are doing trauma healing workshops. It's not ideal. It's certainly not, the best, but they're very isolated. And there's it's a gender-based violence grant to the federal government. And the grant is giving us the ability to get iPads and send those iPads to the women. And then we do our Zoom and do some training and see them, kind of sharing, and sort of like an hour. Actually, it's about 2 hours on Saturdays that we're doing this. So a time to get together, and the women are really opening up about some of the struggles. And the key word here is isolation, just feeling really alone. And the level of violence in the families in many of the women's homes has really escalated over this past time, and they really haven't got a way to get out. So again, we've just applied. Actually, I have to send the grant in after I'm done here today, because there's another one that we can apply for further work. And so you just kind of cobble together these research programs or research grants, and then try to do some work to try to benefit the communities. And then when we're able, we'll be going back to South Sudan and Northern Uganda to do additional work. So I'll walk you through some of these programs. Again, you can kind of see from the first one, the educational and psychosocial needs, and then strategies to support children. Identifying, I really wanted to move from only talking about all the problems, actually, because it was getting kind of depressing after a while, because I was only talking about, you know, challenges and how bad it was for kids. And I said, surely there's got to be something that's good out there, best practices, promising practices, or, you know, what's supporting children and the refugees who had newly arrived in Canada. So again, that was a good opportunity to really see the benefits of the work that we were doing. And we kind of focused in on some schools and some agencies across Canada. This was a sort of, we looked at mid-sized Canadian cities. So we looked at St. John's. We went to, you know, PEI, well, Newfoundland, of course, Newfoundland, PEI, Alberta, and Manitoba, to kind of do a bit of a span and just kind of looking at mid-sized communities. And where for some communities, it was, you know, they hadn't had as many refugees, but during the Syrian, the time when all the Syrians came, it was a big influx of refugees. So again, this was, you know, kind of new for some people, and they were, you know, worried that they weren't doing the right thing. And you know, the teachers were getting together saying, we need some strategies, we need some support. And so we started to do a lot of work in that area of, you know, giving teachers some additional support and training and capacity building in that area. And then there was, you know, when we did see some of the Syrians coming in, you know, that in November 2015 or so, we saw different mental health needs and trauma needs of that group. And it made us really look at, you know, how is this different, and what are these trauma needs, and what is mental health needs? And really around this time, you know, 6 years ago, was a time where people were saying, you know, yeah, Jen, we want you to come talk about trauma. We want you to talk about trauma. And I just kept hearing from groups like yourselves saying, you know, we want more in-servicing, we want more development on trauma, because we need to make sure we're not making things worse for kids. We know that they have experienced these horrific levels of violence, and how are we going to support them? And what if we do something wrong? So again, really out of care and compassion. And we tried to find ways to support students that way. And then we moved more into looking at helping refugees seek employment, and supporting them in communities with different services. So I'm going to kind of throw it all together as a bit of a hodgepodge here for you, but I thought it would be important for us to kind of at least understand that it's kind of various different research programs that I've conducted, and I'm just going to kind of pull out the highlights for you. So again, this is kind of talking about the first one, and this was my first book back when, I guess, I don't know, 2010 or 2011, I can't remember anymore, but somewhere around there, just taking a look at what are these challenges kids are dealing with. I use this, and I only just show you this diagram because it helps you understand the kind of work that I do, in the way that I don't just talk to one person, I talk to the entire system. And so this is like a well-used Bronfenbrenner system. And I adapted it to really fit the needs of refugee students, and sort of thinking about, you know, the individual, so the student who has a refugee background in the center. And then, you know, those close people in the other environments, like their teachers, their relatives, their peers, their family. Who can I talk to in these systems to really help me understand the issues that these kids are struggling with? And this proved to be a really important thing that I did at the beginning of this research, because I've used this model for all of my research from that point on, because I saw the benefit of really talking to people within various systems to really understand the issue. And so the meso system is the connections between the system. And actually what we found was that that's where we were failing. We weren't talking with one another. And the school is like, we're on our own. Nobody's there to help us. And the community's like, the school's not doing anything. They're not helping the kids. And the people in the school are saying, the community is not helping us. They're not supporting us. And so everybody was doing something, but no, and a lot of people were not talking with each other and coordinating services. So again, we saw the importance of kind of bridging the groups a little more and creating stronger connections. And then in the exosystem, that's sort of the outer level of, you know, the system that doesn't necessarily influence directly the student, but indirectly influences them. So at the time we saw some really wonky, I don't have a better word for it, but it was wonky school board policies, like kids who have English as an additional language can't take phys ed because it's a safety issue. They might get hit or something might happen. And we're thinking, what? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I mean, if there's one thing that kids can do is being active and play sports, and certainly there's a way to do that without necessarily having, English as your first language. So we went to bat for many, school divisions there to say this needs to change and that has to be altered, because certainly you're not helping the student. And then the macro system was really that big system, our beliefs about how our entire culture. And at the time, I was doing this work. I had an opportunity to go to Oxford for a foreign affairs fellowship grant. And I was at a time where actually there's quite a lot of anti-refugee sentiment. And actually, at the time, this was like 2005, I was thinking to myself, well, Canada, thank goodness Canada's not like that. Like, I really saw this complete difference in attitude. Like, they were blaming refugees for taking their housing and taking their jobs and doing absurd things and animals. And it's just nonsense, really. And the media was just going kind of crazy. And at the time, they were putting people in detention centers, and I think they still are. And they were rioting in the detention centers and writing SOS in toilet paper in the yards, and there was no-fly zones over it. And I was like, are you serious? I was interviewing people, and they're telling, oh yeah, no worries, this is exactly what's happening. The British people do not want these people here. And I mean, I knew that was only just one person's opinion, but it was a very strong opinion. And it left me thinking, although I think we're very open and accepting and, motivated for, altruistic reasons, I thought to myself, what would change that? And I thought to myself, not much, because if you read, in my city, we have Winnipeg Free Press. So you have something similar in Halifax or Nova Scotia. I mean, you're going to have, your media, you read those editorial lines where people have an opportunity to write back. And it doesn't take very long, 2 or 3 of those comments, and you get it. You understand. There is quite a lot of anti-refugee, and now we see criminalizing refugees and blaming them for coming into the country and for seeking a better life. And the attitude has certainly changed, or maybe just brought up to the surface more, and it was just simmering before, but. That macro system actually did prove to be important to look at. And then again, moving on, I don't want to bore you with these models, but there's a reason for me doing that. It's just to kind of think about that later on. I looked at 3 periods of time: pre-migration, so before the students had come to Canada, transmigration, and post-migration. And that's really how I kind of clump or, put the different challenges in pockets so that you can kind of understand it a little bit better. Most of the kids encountered intense periods of civil war. They had limited, disrupted, or no schooling, experienced loss. Some didn't even know where their family members were. Most had experienced high intensity violence and really violent, horrific things that I know that many of us cannot even imagine happening to families or to children. The students continued to be affected by their pre-migration. So although they had come to Canada, they kept talking about how what happened is still part of their life. Of course it is, right? And I mean, their memories still connect them to people back home. And for one of the principals said to me, war is only a phone call away. For them, they lift up the phone and they call their family members, and they're still in a conflict area. There's still uncertainty. They're still, trying to find enough food or enough water for their family and to provide for their family and have an education. So again, the complexities and the complications with war are continuing on for many people. And the students were affected. They were still worrying and had quite a lot of anxiety about the situation that their family and brother or sister were still in. The school personnel talked about hints or glimpses into the students' experiences. They said, we don't really know the full story. We only really get hints and glimpses of what's happened, but we piece it together. And so this was me starting to understand the importance of really talking to not just the student who, why would they tell me all of this information? Who am I? But they, the teachers got information, and the principal got information, the custodian got information, the counselor had information, and they pieced it together and really helped me understand really what these kids had experienced. One of the activities that I did in the book is called My World. And really, this was about trying to help me understand the experiences that the students had had. And they weren't necessarily using words. So we had an activity that we did. In fact, in the research program, I gave them each a camera, and I had them take pictures of their world so that, we could use it as a stimulus to talk about. And those pictures proved to also be really helpful, because I learned about where some of them were staying, where they were working, who their close, friends or trusting adults were. And, I started to see pictures of this same teacher in absolutely every kid's pictures. And I said to myself, who is this? Oh, this is this, I don't want to name the name, but this is this person. And I realized the importance of me talking to this teacher after this point, to really understand, like, every kid was taking pictures of her because she was such an important part of their world. So what I did then is, in the book, I incorporated 42 lessons at the back of the book, so teachers could use this. And, this was an activity that I had people do, is draw a picture of the world. And I have, teachers have done this. They've done it with pictures. They've done it with collage, poster paper and collage. They've done beautiful things. They've done things to set to music. They've done worlds kind of out of, magazine pictures, that type of thing. It's just an example of how you take, kids were talking about not feeling like they were part of the world. They felt like they were between two worlds. They felt like they didn't really belong to their home anymore, and they didn't really belong in Canada. They just felt like they were in between two worlds. And that's some of the comments that the students said. So then, as later on, as I'm going through all the data, I said, I got to do a lesson based on this world and really try to help me understand their world and be proud of what their world is. So this is an activity I do with teachers when I'm training in Uganda, in South Sudan, and wherever I might be in Canada. And it's kind of a fun thing to do as well. So just as an example, this is a different one. This is an example, like, I thought it would be easier for us to maybe do this because it's not so, drawing a picture. It's called an I Am From poem, and probably you have seen something like this before, but it's kind of fun to do as a group. And the last time I did this was when I was in New Brunswick, and we loved it. It was really beautiful. It was really a fun thing to do. I'm going to have to only do a short version, and I wish I could be there with you to kind of walk you through it and to really have some fun with it. It's a poem, and you write it as a group, and you can either write it from, your own personal point of view. But in this case, because we're a group, I'm going to do the I Am From Canada. So we're all right now in Canada. I assume this webinar is everybody is in Canada right now. So I think what we'll do is, when we go into the breakout room, kind of walk through, where are some of the places, stories you remember about your childhood, younger years. So that's the first question. So then you just have the words. I am from places where snow is up to my chin, or like that kind of thing. Okay. So what we're going to do is, Chris is going to zoom us into the ether, and we're going to end up in a breakout room, and you're going to have probably 6 to 8 people or so. And I'm just going to have you try this out, and we're going to see what happens. And I'm not going to have enough time to everybody to go through it, but I'll see if I can get one group to share what they came up with. You can just volunteer to do that. I'm not going to put you on the spot. So again, the one we're doing is on the bottom. It's the group I Am From Canada activity. And the groups will put together a few lines that might reflect a possible version of Canada's I Am From poem. This is to be written as if the country were reflecting back on its existence. Now, one thing I'm not sure of is how I'm going to put you in a breakout room but still be able to see this. So we're going to see if Chris has the magic here. If not, what we'll have to do is I'm in full screen. I can always move to my other computer, and I'll cut and paste off this other computer and put it into the chat just in case you're stuck, okay? And I can't see anybody, but I'm assuming you're with me. And I'm going to give you only like 6 minutes, little short time. So Chris, when you're ready, you can zoom us around here.
So everyone's popping out into the rooms now, Jan. If you click on the breakout rooms on the left, you'll be able to see join room or join audio, and you can pop in and out of those rooms to hear what's happening.
Okay, Chris, how do they see that I am from Poem?
Once they're in their breakout room, they won't see it. So they'll have to either take a snapshot of it to review or come back to the main room to look at it.
Yeah, I didn't think of taking a picture. That's brilliant.
We could put it in as a shared document or shared notes too, if the file is available. You could just copy it and paste it into the shared notes on the left side.
Okay, shared notes on the left side. Okay, I can do that. Let me just pull it up. I'm going to use my other computer so I don't mess this around. Is the sound and everything okay on your end?
Sounds good to me. It seems to be going smoothly.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, it sounds good.
Okay, are you happy so far, Peru?
Yes, yes, I am. Yeah, yeah. I'm glad the echo went away. That was I was worried.
Oh yeah, there's nothing like listening to yourself. Like I hear myself now, it's awful. Ugh. Okay.
So I set the rooms for 7 minutes. So they'll automatically be ported back into the main room after that 7-minute time expires.
Okay.
And we're down to about 4 minutes of that duration left. You can see that at the bottom of the breakout room tab there, Jen.
Yeah, I'm just looking for how I can get this back in here.
So, Chris, I know what one of the participants was saying to close all the notifications off, but I think you did that, right?
Yes, I turned off many of them, not the chat one though, so that we can still get alerts when chat messages are being entered.
Yeah, thanks.
This takes forever here. I'm just pulling it in. I am from... Chris, I don't think I'm going to go. Should I leave my full screen then and go in, or?
if you click on that breakout room, you can join the audio and just listen in if you don't want to fully commit to going into a room with your audio and video and everything. You can just kind of overview what people are talking about for another minute and 30 seconds before the duration.
Yeah, I'll leave them to be.
Sure. If you'd like, we could do a little bit longer for the next breakout room to create a little more time for you to navigate.
Yeah, I was just trying to get the cut and paste. I put it in the shared notes. I don't know if you can see it.
No, I'm not seeing it there. I see you're in there now.
Look, I'm drag and dropping it in there.
Maybe try the keyboard shortcuts, Control C and Control V. Sometimes those shortcuts seem to work better sometimes.
By the time I do this.
Yeah, you're down to about 30 seconds before everyone's going to come back, Jan.
Yeah, okay, I'll just leave it. Okay.
All right, here's the 10-second countdown. 10, 9. All right, everyone should be back from the breakout rooms now.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I realized once you flew away that we could have just taken a picture with a phone or something of the I Am From poem. So by the time I was cutting and pasting, it was too late. So sorry that I'm not sure if you had the copy of this at all, but they're pretty common kind of poems. So even if you gave it a try, perhaps if you came up with something. Is there anybody, any of the groups who would be willing to either share what this was like doing this or give us their final product and read it out for us, even if you only got halfway through? Raised hands. Robin Peters. All right, you win. Thank you, Robin.
Hi. Our group just came up with a couple. We didn't get all the way through, but Astrid's from Germany, actually, and then the rest of our group, I think, were from Nova Scotia or Canada. But then we kind of found some things that we all had in common. So we put, I am from beaches and the ocean. I am from hiking, camping, riding bikes. I am from fear of the dark and the boogeyman under my bed. And I am from the hope of traveling the world. And that's as far as we got.
Nice, nice. So how was that to do? Like together?
For me, I thought it was really nice to see. It was nice to see the things that we had in common with Astrid because she grew up in Germany. So it was kind of nice to see everyone was like, oh, me too, me too. And we all kind of had these commonalities in our childhood. So that was kind of nice to share with each other.
Nice, thank you. And is there any other group who either want to comment on the activity or even comment about how you might use this activity or adapt this activity? I see Hania raised their hand. Anya?
Oh my word. All right. I don't know how this works. This isn't the traditional platform, it seems.
No.
Whatever. The situation is, I don't know if you've ever heard of Jamboard, but we learned that technique at a recent professional development, because on Jamboard, you see, we can just put stickers and then you have these slides with people and you can comment simultaneously. We had trouble getting this page started. Most didn't seem to have a working microphone. So I would just recommend trying a different platform. The idea was great. Everybody was keen, but we didn't really have the wherewithal to make it happen. I apologize for that.
That is not a problem. So Hania, you mean that you're not able to use your microphones on the computer that you're maybe using right now? Right?
I had a microphone little symbol, but the others in the group did not seem to have one.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so just you got to speak. Okay, so I don't know if Chris, you might be able to fix that for the next breakout rooms, that maybe it's something we could try to ensure everybody's able. So
sorry,
yeah,
I missed that, Jan. Can you say it again? What was the request?
Yeah, and the other teachers resorted to using the chat to communicate with each other. So they were very resourceful, but the problem was, you know, by the time we figured out that the communication was inconsistent and challenging, the time was up.
Oh, that's too bad. So, but you know, you can take it to teachers to figure a way to do this, right? You just use chat. I mean, it's not ideal, but at least you get the sort of idea about, you know, running through this kind of activity. So, I mean, I think in real life, say we were all around sitting in round tables together, you'd have 8 people around or 6 people around your table. You could see how some of these questions, like some activities you do that are important with people in your life, what characterizes the time, eras, the seasons, the moments, you know, even the fact that, you know, most of you, or all of you are in Nova Scotia, talking about the water and the ocean, and, you know, how your world is even different from, say, me, where, you know, the groups that I do this activity with here would talk about the prairies and the flatlands and the snow and the cold. So again, you know, you can kind of pull out a little bit, but the real, and thank you, Hania and Robin, for sharing, because that gives us a little bit of feedback. And I know it's really hard in this platform. So, you know, being on Zoom or whatever this one is, I mean, it's awkward, but you know, I think we can see how we can walk through something like this in a group and sort of come up with something that would be useful. And you can change these. You can change these words. You can change the starter points to really fit your situation or the information you want to find out. So you can see if you did this individually with students contemplating their own version of I am from, or you could do, like, the one I picked was just I am from Canada, like just basically what is Canada, like I am, you know, even if you're even, you know, we found the person who was from Germany. There's even a way to do this when people are from other places. And maybe that the importance of finding commonality, which is what they did with the person who was not necessarily born in Canada, is you see what you have in common. And that's also a good result. That's also a good outcome of doing this activity. So thank you for that. Nanda has their hand up.
Yeah. And Jan, I was thinking that if this could be like a one word, and like, you know, you just said that actually, after I thought of this, that it could be like, where are you from? It could be just Halifax, Canada, just one word, not like a phrase or a sentence. And then regarding other things also, like those haiku poems, you know, with those few words in it, like, and I was thinking we could use Google Translate if the language is not there yet, and they could just put it in whatever language and then translated it to English. Just to get the thoughts going on in the person's what they are going through, and I think this is a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those suggestions. Using Google Translate, and also, doing a haiku type, or, a poem or a structure poem of whatever sort. You could see how you could really have, like, you could even have a dual, like how they have dual storybooks. You could have dual poem in different languages, expressing their own self, and they could be doing it in their own, in their first language, and then also in English or in French. So there's lots of variation. So it's kind of a fun activity. I mean, I just found this one and adapted it to kind of fit for this, and thought I would try it out. And anything that we can do to encourage kind of the sharing of who you are and where you're from, and celebrating difference and similarities as well, is an important part of sort of building that culturally responsive classroom as well. Alexandria and Leanne have their hands raised. So Alexandria.
I don't know if you can hear it, Jan, but every time someone makes a comment or goes in or out, there's a little notification.
Oh,
and Amanda told us you do. Yeah, we're hearing it too. I'm just wondering if you could mute your notifications, because that worked for me. Amanda said you just click on the 3 dots in the right-hand corner.
Okay, I'll have to stop sharing then.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I've just muted notifications for the chat for all, Jan, so they should be no more notifications for chat.
Okay.
Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. Yeah, it was like, I'm kind of used to teaching junior high, so these little background noises, that's all right. How funny you can get. Yeah, it's all good. Okay, this is not what I wanted. Oh boy, I got a mess here. I'm not sure what to do here.
Maybe just stop that screen share and start again with sharing from, was it your PowerPoint slides?
Yeah, I don't know how I messed that up.
Maybe by selecting a window.
Yeah, I did. Clearly, I can't think as well when I have an audience. Okay, sorry about that, folks. You should see that now. Okay, I think we're back. I have my other computer here and it looks normal again. Sorry, a little panic vision there. Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm not sure I'm still hearing the notifications, but I'll just kind of keep going if that's okay. Transmigration. So, I mean, that's kind of talking about pre-migration. Transmigration is that period of time, maybe moving from their home country to a host country. And for many students, this could be years of displacement from camp to camp. For some kids, this has been a 10-year process, maybe 10 years living in a camp. So many of the kids from Syria, again, they had been coming from Jordan or Lebanon, where again the experience was really quite different and difficult, where they, in some cases, were reporting that they weren't really, looked after, or they were kind of marginalized in their country. They were exploited. Some of them had been detained and tortured, and so again, just various levels of transmigration experience. Most of the kids talked about camps being violent, unsafe, and difficult, and those are much more so for some of the females who were interviewed as well. In terms of post-migration, I kind of categorized the challenges in 4 main areas. And I'm not going to go through each one in detail. I'm just going to kind of highlight some of the main ones. In terms of educational challenges, we see, and again, although this happened a while ago, a lot of these challenges are still prevalent. Like they haven't dissipated. I mean, there's programs and services to support, but we still, like, even talking about kids, interviewing students, it would have been 3 years ago before COVID, we are still hearing the same thing. So it kind of brought me full circle back to, we still have lots of work to do. for students adjusting to school, age issues, for many of the kids, putting into an age appropriate classroom, being 16, being put into, a grade 10 classroom, but yet you're functioning more at a grade 4. So again, difficulties with, keeping up with the classes. And I'm not sure what it's like in Nova Scotia, but in Manitoba, we have a long way to go in terms of differentiated instruction and finding ways to teach curriculum at various levels. So our teachers are asking for specialized training in EAL, teaching EAL students. So again, just noticing that their pre-service teacher training didn't really include that, and didn't really include information about how to support students in who English is not their first language. So our EAL teachers will tell you that this is years of training to learn the skills that they have, and to teach language and literacy skills and numeracy as well to non-English as a first, when English is not the student's first language. So again, teaching concepts, but in a different way. So I think, it's not anymore just the job of the EAL consultants, or, I'm not sure if you use EAL or ESL or English language learners. It's sort of interchangeable here, but, we need that skill to be able to teach students and to meet their needs, but yet the teachers themselves haven't really been taught that. So here we were, the newcomer community was pressuring the government to make EAL teaching like a certificate, so that you had to be trained in EAL teaching pedagogy to be qualified to work in some of our newcomer, like higher needs newcomer schools. So many of the students had high expectations to really make it in Canada. So they had a tremendous sort of, I guess, responsibility or burden. I guess it felt like more like talking to kids with a big weight on their shoulders. And I don't know how else to explain it, but they really were feeling like they needed to be the one. They were sent to Canada in many cases. They were the ones who, their family wanted them to send money back home to support people back home. And yet that's like, life is different here. It's a struggle. It wasn't always easy. And in the front of the book, Supporting Refugee Children, I interviewed a young man. His name was Sokut, and I interviewed him, and really some of his words were very cutting. They were very sad to hear, because he said to me, in Sudan, I was a refugee, but I'm still a refugee here. Maybe it's different, the clothes that I wear, the food that I eat, but I'm a refugee. I will always be a refugee. But we can change that. And so he was really telling me that he's still struggling in Canada. There's still lots of work to do. But he had hope. He had hope that the system would change and things would get better for him. So again, academic literacy, having the language, and I'm probably speaking to people who already know this, but the ability to have basic conversation, to say, order a pizza or to take a bus, was very different than having the academic literacy to take on a law 20S, like 20, I'm trying to say like 20S here is what we call it, but like a grade 11 law class, or a grade 11 language or literature class, or even a pre-cal class, like, a math class. So again, even having the language to sort of converse is not necessarily the level, obviously, that you need to do the schoolwork at that level. So having this disparity, so ability level and aspirations, many of the students talked about, and I mean, if you're working with students who are from refugee backgrounds, their experience has been be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, a teacher, and yet, for many of them, and we're not the ones to destroy dreams, but it's going to look different. Like, it's not just going to be get to grade 12 and then move in, because in our system, many of the kids, you know, weren't getting their science, like they weren't even taking sciences. And, you know, for us, we need to explain to them, if you want to go in to be a doctor, you actually have to take grade 10, 11, and grade 12 sciences, chemistry, physics, biology, math. And so again, you know, and they weren't even in those classes. And so just not understanding really the trajectory and what needed to happen in order for them to get to where they wanted to be. And no, we're not saying you're not going to do that. You're not going to be there, but it's going to take longer, and you're going to need to do these things to get to where you need to be, if that is your goal. And, you know, some of them did it. Some of them did it. But then some of them, you know, maybe weren't even in. We have something called an e-credit. So they were in an e-credit, which meant that's not even university entrance. So they'd graduate from grade 12, but they didn't even have, you know, the proper entrance requirements to get into a post-secondary program. So again, disparity and just maybe not understanding. Nobody had taken the time to explain to them. Maybe the parents, you know, thought, well, they're in grade 11, they're getting grade 11, but not understanding that there was different kinds of credits. So again, just a real difference in terms of that. And again, I put in some quotations from the students, from the teachers, just because I think I need to maintain their words as much as possible so that you can understand. So this student's talking about teachers think everybody's the same as the white student. The teachers need to give more time, like Mr. B, he's a good teacher. God will help him. I take his classes. He feels comfortable. Whenever I tell him I have a lot of assignments, he helps me, and I have to go to work later, he will tell me to hand in my assignment tomorrow. Then he can let me do all my assignments. But there are other teachers that no, you just do it. You don't say nothing. You just be quiet, because I'm scared to say anything, because, you know, he's a teacher. You know, they didn't understand my situation or my problem. So, you know, this is a student talking about how some teachers are very helpful, but then there's some that, you know, you just can't really approach them. And so in this is the funny story about this one is Mr. B actually ended up being, I interviewed him, and he ended up going with me to Uganda to do as a research program. He'd never left Canada before. And so I said, let's go to Africa. We'll go to Uganda and we'll do some work. And he was really passionate, a really caring, loving teacher. Students loved him. Anyway, I said to him, you need to do a PhD. I said, you're smart and you're capable, and, you know, you're good at this. You have to, and I bothered him for so long. He just got his PhD. Like literally, he sent me October 19th. He got it. So he is now teaching in my former faculty. I was from the Faculty of Education at the University of Winnipeg. And so he is a professor now in the university. So it's kind of funny how, you know, you kind of push people to do things and it kind of turns out. And he ended up just being a really, he's a great professor and a great teacher. And, you know, kids know who's on their side. And he is still a very compassionate person and an advocate for many refugee students. So again, just kind of how a story kind of comes around. This is another activity I do, and it's kind of before, during, and after. It was really trying to understand this pre-migration, transmigration, post-migration period. And so it was an activity. I'm just telling you about it. We're not going to do it. But when I am in real life, in real person, I give out art supplies and we have some fun with this. But, you know, you can give out file folders that are plain, or you can give out paper and just fold it in half. And, you know, you can just have them look like they're doors. So, you would essentially take a paper, fold it in half, and then that would be like before, and then you'd have another one for during, and another one for after. And so inside, you can have the students draw or write words about what was before, what did it look like before, and then another one for during, and another one for after. And the idea of the door is just that it gives a bit of privacy, is that it's kind of like you open a door and these are the things that you see. And it's more of a private way of doing things. And again, they can either do it for, some students were doing before they came to Canada, during and after. But again, some of them did something else, like before they went to, high school, during high school, and then after they finished. Or like just an example. Some of the adults I do it with is, I don't know, before they met somebody, during, after. So whatever example you want to do, it doesn't have to necessarily be a conflict situation. So this was really talking about, or, pulling from the theme that was identified before, during, and after trans, pre and post, and trying to make sense of it, and really talking about these stages in our life, and also talking about, what we want to keep from before and what we want to not keep in our minds or in our memories. So it led me to then doing additional activities about sort of bridging the two worlds and putting things together. In terms of psychosocial challenges, we saw a lot of the breakdown of family structure. The family structure changed when they came to Canada. Many of the families didn't feel a lot of support coming after they came to Canada. Social structure was broken down, coming from a very community-based environment to more of an individual-based, caused a lot of challenges, distrust. There were safety and protection issues. We were housing many, and still do, of our newcomers in areas of lots of problems in some of our downtown areas, and gang activity, and poverty, and competing for very limited resources. So it causes, and still does, a lot of issues in our community. Insecurity, loneliness, of course, mental health issues, and just coping with loss. If some of the parents I interviewed some of the moms and dads, and they were talking, 62 people in her family were killed. Just to really understand that. And this mom in particular was suffering from severe mental health issues. She was unable to work, but the daughter, who was in high school, just a really solid, smart student, was working at Superstore and supporting the mom, and also going to school full time. And I'm sure she's probably doing something pretty amazing with her life right now. So, but again, suffering with her mom, looking after her mom. Her mom was not able to work, dealing with all of the loss issues and mental health. Her husband was killed in the war, and in a very violent way in front of her. And so again, just trying to move forward, but these are psychosocial issues. These are issues of trauma that really, for many people, they didn't have a lot of support for themselves or their families. So I really felt like in interviewing the students, they felt really alone and really not sure who they could turn to, except they did go to certain teachers. They did find people who would, provide Mr. B or this other teacher to provide the support that they needed at that time. Another student, our life is not easy. It's just been 3 years. People don't know, because to get here, you're having a good life. If they see you looking fine and feeling a good life, they think that everything was fine in the past, and you don't have the chance to talk to them because they don't come and ask you. You don't have somebody to talk to and tell them your feelings. You can't get any help for your heart inside because nobody's talking to you. I feel that way. So again, I really try to maintain the words of the students here, and I think anybody reading this can really understand what this student is really trying to cope with at this time. So it also made me think of another activity, which was Inside Out, which is where I talk about, tracing your body, tracing your body on a chart paper. And we do this together in groups as well, but you trace sort of a profile of yourself. You get a partner to help you, and then you draw inside how you're feeling, and then on the outside, sort of things that you're conveying to others. And I've done this in all of my teacher training, sessions, in Uganda, in South Sudan, again, Zimbabwe. We've done just every single time. We have a lot of fun because, of course, everybody's laughing when you're tracing yourself, because then you see this actual outline and it's like, wow, I didn't know my nose was that big. And we just have a good laugh. I call it AKA chaos, because it just turns into mayhem in the room because we're all laughing. But then we come back together and we use a variety of different sort of, colored pencils, crayons, whatever, and draw how you're feeling on the inside. And so I have been keeping many digital pictures of the work that I do. And actually I put together, when I was in the Harvard program for refugee trauma a few years back, we had to produce a video at the end. And so I actually produced a video called The Classroom as a Healing Environment. And I was able to put together all of these activities from both my Canadian classroom teaching, with teachers who were supporting refugee students, and also with the work that I did in Uganda and South Sudan primarily. And so just to kind of see the same activity being implemented in various contexts, and sort of the way people, you know, show their work and talk about their work was really interesting for me. So again, just here you can kind of get a sense of what the student is feeling. Economic challenges, and I kind of alluded to this already, but many of the students struggling with poverty, not a lot of money, not a lot of support after coming to Canada. So many of them had about a year, and then after that they needed to start working. They're, you know, being a teen in a society where people have cell phones and earpods, you know, iPhones, whatever, nice runners, whatever you want to call it, like, you know, trendy clothes. There's a lot of pressure for kids to be like the other kids, and they want to fit into the Canadian life. In our particular community, we were seeing a real easy pull to criminal activity and gang involvement. At this particular time, a lot of students were joining gangs, and it was a real issue in our city. And I have seen it pop up in other areas as well. Alberta, you know, is also in, you know, Calgary, there's a lot of issues as well. I mean, in any area, you just see when kids are not finding a sense of belonging in school, they'll find it somewhere else. And unfortunately, in some cases, this doesn't lead to really good activity. So I did interview somebody from the justice system, and she said to me, you know, Jan, once they leave the school system, for whatever reason, they're getting kicked out, pushed out for whatever reason, or behavior is not appropriate, they asked to leave. She said, we have about, you know, 6 to 8 months before they're part of my system, which means the justice system. So again, it just highlights the importance of the school being really key in terms of supporting the adjustment for refugee students. And if we don't put the support into the school, they'll get support somewhere else. And now, for about 10 years or so in our city, we saw a decline in gang involvement. And then now in the last 5 years, it's jumped up again. So again, as there's, you know, different groups, and it's not just kids joining, it's people who are working at Tim Hortons during the day and doing gang work at night. So this is like adults, you know, 30-year-olders and 25-year-olds. And the issue for me is I work downtown, and right, you know, next to where I park my car is an area where they actively recruit children for their gangs. And so it's, you know, and now with COVID, there's less people around, so it's a little more dodgy. But it's you know, the families don't necessarily know the signs of what to do, and when their kids are showing up with lots of money and different things. And of course, kids, if they find out they can walk a bag of stuff across the park and get $100 for it. We had some gang members waiting right when the newcomers would arrive in the temporary housing area in our downtown. And they would wait on the street, and like within the first week, they were doing drug deals with these kids. And then they said, you know, we took your picture while you walked this across the street. You just did a drug deal. If you tell on us, or if you're not part of us, you know, you're going to get deported, and your family's going to be red flagged, and this is going to happen to you. And we did have to do a significant amount of, not me personally, but the settlement agencies talked about having to do street smart training, like right in the first 2 weeks of arriving, just to keep kids out of this this danger kind of getting, you know, unknowingly doing drug deals and getting into trouble. I'm just gonna check my time here. This is a student talking, and he's talking about the importance of how, not importance, but the necessity of working. And he said, maybe the government could help. That way I could concentrate on my school, then I wouldn't have to work as much. Maybe I would just work 2 days a week. Then I can concentrate on my studies the other days. There's a way if I have help, but I just need to send money from my brothers, because if I don't send, they don't eat, and they don't work back home. I'm like their hope, because every time I call them, they tell me I am their hope. And this young man really did have just this sense of tremendous responsibility for his family. He worked every night at McDonald's, which was across the street from the school, and sent like $300 back home to his family every month. So a remarkable young man, but a tremendous amount of responsibility. Environmental experiences, most of the kids talked about, and teachers had, they knew about students having altercations with police. Racism and discrimination was probably one of the most frequently talked about issues of challenge that teachers noted and students noted, and everybody just kind of accepted, or not accepted like this is a good thing, but oh yeah, racism is alive and well. And even I was interviewing some teachers, they were telling me about even administrators saying quite discriminatory things, racist things to students. And, behind, when they thought nobody was listening and trying, and getting away with it. And there's some teachers who just were not very open. So again, gang involvement, conflict in our community with our Indigenous youth, criminal activity, sexism, gender issues, financial difficulties, poor housing. A lot of the housing is in our downtown, and it really wasn't. They're not good places. They're places that are often shut down because of bed bugs or cockroaches, and so the families. One young woman, one mom said to me, I just want to go back to Sudan. I don't want to be here anymore. This is not what I thought I was getting into. Like, I'll just go back. I don't have any support here. And like my children are going to get killed on the street. And she was serious. She did not want to stay. Again, this is the activity that I talked about. It's the inside out drawing. And so I explained this already. So it's really talking about how you feel on the inside, and then what you show people on the outside. Another activity I do is, which I kind of alluded to as well, is talking about what do you want to keep from one of the world, one world, and then your life in Canada. So I kind of get them to, and you can see this if you look in the book, it's like a little bridge, and they have like the foundation for the bridge and the water under the bridge. One parcel of land is on one side, and what do you want to remember about your culture, customs, and the way of life before you move to Canada? Because there's a lot of great things that they want to remember and not forget. On the other parcel side of land, what do you enjoy or appreciate about Canada and your life in Canada? On the metal structures, you list the names of people who will support you in adjusting, who can you lean on? On the top of your bridge, you list your personal characteristics, what kind of person you are, the activities you enjoy, the kind of personality you have, what makes you unique. In the sky over the bridge, you write your dreams for yourself. What do you want to be? What do you want to become? What are some of your goals? And then in the water, you can decide the memories or events you don't want to remember. You can put them in there you can choose to discard them or to put them in the water. So again, it can be an activity that you could develop much more further than this, but it is one idea. Leanne, I see your name just came up with your raised hand. I'm hoping everybody can still hear me. Go ahead, Leanne. Leanne, are you there? I'm going to keep going. It might be Leanne telling me don't forget to give everybody a break. I won't forget, I promise. I'm going to stop in about 3 minutes. I don't know if that's what it was. And I don't see the chat anymore. I'm really hoping you folks are here.
Yes, there are. There's lots of comments in the chat.
We are here.
Okay, yeah. Okay, good. I don't see the chat because it's on another computer and I'm kind of really focused here, but okay, I'm just gonna keep talking, and if there's anything that I need to stop, I'll make sure I stop for questions because there's probably some really good suggestions in the chat. So I'll just keep going. Please ask questions on behalf of the group. Yes, okay, Peru is going through the chat and she's going to help us with the questions just to kind of siphon it down so that I don't have to read them all. So thank you, Peru. I'm just going to wrap up this one little section here and just talking about Bronfenbrenner's model. That was the concentric circles that I showed, and I told you I was showing you for a reason. I want to talk about what really happened, what I started to see. I started to see something smaller. I started to see something smaller in the microsystem. And I was thinking to myself, what's making the difference? Like, what's keeping these kids in school? And I said, it's something smaller than a microsystem. It's like these small groups of people, or this really important person. It's the Mr. B and the Miss C that were really working together to support the kids. And I said, it's something smaller. And I said to myself, you know what? You can actually go to school and go to, you go to a high school, but it's not unless you feel a sense of belonging at that high school that's really going to keep you there. And so I said, there's something that, the sports team, the Mr. R, who is opening up his classroom every lunch to do prayer groups for students. It's Miss C, who was taking them to doctor's appointments and translating for the parents. It was what I termed a nanosystem. So I called it something smaller than the microsystem. Unfortunately, Bronfenbrenner passed away during my research, but again, it's not like he would have cared what Jan in Winnipeg is doing, but, it would have been interesting, because what I was really saying was that if people are part of this nanosystem, they really had more connection and they had an easier time adjusting to life in Canada. So again, I remember thinking this nanosystem is what stops this other theory of kind of dropping out of school and getting, kicked out of school or whatever happens, and sort of this downward spiral of life. The people who were instrumental in the school system or the community system is what kept those kids connected to school. But the problem was that this is what the cost was. For many of these people, the teachers, the coaches, the support staff, they've said, I'm tired, I'm tapped out, I'm crying easily, drained, I feel scared, I have difficulty sleeping, I'm burning out. These are the comments from the teachers and the administrators who were really reaching out and creating these sort of little systems of support that made a difference. So we are seeing that it's just really a tremendous also a responsibility, but also teachers and the people who are doing this really not feeling like they're getting anywhere, like tiring. They're like, one of the teachers said, I just want to go teach in another school. I'm done. I quit. I can't handle this anymore. Like, just really feeling isolated and alone. Nanda, I see you have your hand up.
I just wanted to add to that sense of belonging. It is so important, even as a personal experience on my, like what I have experienced. I lived in Toronto and then I moved to rural Nova Scotia. It made a huge difference to me when I felt that I belonged. I wanted to be here. I wanted to do my best. And the same applies to our newcomer students. That sense of belonging is, if they feel that, I think we can get them where we want them. Like,
yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that. And I think, Nanda, like, the important thing is, it's not always the refugee person, the person who has refugee experience. It's not always their job to do all this. It's our job as Canadians as well to create that sense of belonging and to do things that are inviting, to have people over, to make them part of your social circle. So again, the school, Canadians have a large part to play. Like, adjustment is a two-way process, right? And so I think it's something we need to be aware of and not just think, well, people are fine because they look fine, or they're smiling and this is the way it is. So yeah, I mean, the belonging, I mean, thank you for reinforcing that. And I can't stress it enough. It is really important and something essential for the work that we are doing. This is one teacher's comment. She said, right now I feel like we're really on our own. The only thing that makes me feel better about that is that I know that the kids feel like they're also on their own. So they appreciate any help that they get from us, but it's not fair to them or to us. So now you're starting to hear a little bit of anger, right, from this teacher. And here's another teacher. They feel like the promised land they worked so hard to get into is not what they wanted it to be. Again, so just disappointment. Just sort of wrapping this sort of section up is, so I turned in these themes. I think I came up with 170 different themes. I wrote 42 lessons in these four main kind of categories, just really thinking about lessons to address self-expression, psychosocial health issues, focusing on strengths like accomplishments, resilience, what are your support mechanisms? So really trying to keep things positive, and also peace education and community building. Again, you know, I'm not going to go into all the details of the lessons, but that's what I did in sort of trying to provide at least some tools for teachers and settlement workers to really try to help students through. Okay, so we're at 8:22. I think what we should do is just flip into more of a like maybe a 5-minute Q&A, and then maybe a short break, if that's okay. And then we'll kind of just keep rolling through, if that's all right. I'm going to turn it over to Peru, who's going to help us with the moderation.
Thanks, Jan. So I'm just going to read out some of the comments. So Rochelle said, I wish our high school students had the opportunity for intensive English immersion for a year before taking academic courses. Ray was saying, I think Halifax West and Citadel offer that, maybe need the numbers to warrant it in person. Would be good to offer it online for high school students who don't have the school population to have in-person EAP. Astrid said we need professional mental health support for our students and their families, ideally in their first language. You've probably come across that over there as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
I mean, you're on mute, Jen. No, you're not on mute, sorry.
No, I think for, you know, I mean, one of the first things we did with many of the schools is put all of the parent information in, you know, like 30 different languages. You know, like just so that students and their parents would be able to understand like what are the policies, what do they need to know about the school, the students, the process. So I mean, that's a key component. I mean, I think translation is always an issue because of the difficulty of getting, you know, different speakers into the school, translation, the cost of translation. And again, just, you know, sometimes the nature of the content that you need to translate is very personal. So again, it makes it very difficult. And I mean, one of the things that did emerge, which we really need to stay away from, is having the children translate for the parents, you know, because that causes, you know, power differential and a whole bunch of other issues. So again, just something to keep in mind, but you folks probably already know that. Is there any questions right now, Peru?
So just some more comments. Danny was saying hard when they don't have language knowledge to express those feelings. I find some students then express their frustrations through their negative behaviors.
Absolutely.
I would like some suggestions as to how to deal with that. It is very emotionally draining to not know how to approach this. I know it is happening at Citadel, which is one of the high schools here in Halifax.
Okay, so it's easier to be bad than to look, you know, uneducated or not knowing things, right? So when kids don't know what to do, so their frustration at sort of not being able to do the work or to be where they need to be causes a lot of frustration. That's frustrating, and then what happens is it's easier for them to be, you know, misbehaving and doing things that are inappropriate in a classroom or to other people. And then, you know, the teachers, I mean, it's like any kind of class, like student misbehavior. I think it's going to be, you know, it's going to depend on the actual behavior. It's going to depend on the student. I mean, for many of the students, the behavior is coming out because the hurt and the anger inside is eating them up. And so, you know, for some of them, just, you know, having more patience and not entering into their conflict cycle is going to be really important. To try to distance yourself from the behavior and the person is really important. I mean, I'm kind of going back to my earlier work as a counselor and you know, anger management work, and just, you know, trying to step outside and give kids more time. Like, you know, when they're misbehaving, sometimes it can be really bad. Like it can be really scary for other kids in the classroom. It can be very violent. I mean, I don't think, you know, like you can't teach away trauma, right? And that's a slide I have later on in this presentation, is no matter how hard we try, if a kid is coming to your classroom hurt and not feeling a sense of belonging and scared, and because of the, you know, experiences that they've had, very little teaching is going to go on unless they feel safe. And so, or very little learning. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind, is that, you know, sometimes sometimes the work I have to do is with teachers to get them to really understand, what does it mean if you're a refugee coming from this place of the world? Like, what did these kids go through? Because they don't necessarily tell you, but, you know, they may have witnessed really high levels of violence with their family. And I'm not generalizing that this, you know, I am generalizing, but I'm not saying this happens to everybody. But there's some pretty common themes if you're, you know, coming from a country of significant conflict that you likely will have endured. And certainly safety and security and lack thereof is going to be a major issue. And likely you've, you know, as my interviews have shown, the levels of violence have been pretty horrendous. And I mean, I don't want to go into that at all, but it's hard for kids to even grapple with that, you know, and come to Canada and sit in a classroom when they're trying to get through what they remember and what they see. I mean, you just like the suggestion to do a year of language training and, you know, sort of transition training. How about a year of actually just understanding the experiences that they've had and providing a safe and secure environment? Because that might be a better transition program in terms of getting them into high school and having or seeing more success, instead of plunking them into a classroom and hoping for the best. I'm not saying you do that, but we did for a long time and it didn't work out. And I mean, the behavior came out. We had kids taking, you know, if it wasn't anger towards others and the teacher, it was anger towards themselves. And we had one student who was taking a razor blade and cutting her face. And one time she had cut at least 20 on each side. And I said to her, what happened? And she said, oh, my cat. I said, no, I don't think so. I don't think a cat did that. And, you know, and I mean, talking with her to really understand what happened with her and the hurt that she was feeling to try to get the pain out. Another student was eating the stuffing out of a couch. She was cutting, you know, the couch was ripped and she was eating the stuffing. Another one was eating her hair. Again, just like trying to work through some of these experiences that they've had. So it either comes out as anger or sort of self-directed or self-harm. And I don't think we can do a lot until we deal with those feelings. And I think the classroom may just be so overwhelming for many of them that we're going backwards instead of forwards on that. I'm not sure I answered that appropriately for you. We've got to distance ourselves from the students. We need more strategies. Part of what I'm doing now is working with teacher groups on a model of sort of trauma-informed care and what to do when kids disclose and what to do to support them in the classroom and how to create a safe environment. So long answer, complicated answer, but I hope I've touched on some of the kind of key issues there.
Thanks, Jan.
I see Sarah's comment. We do the class plunk. Okay, so Winnipeg's not so different. Yeah, and Rochelle, you wrote something about asking our newcomers to take courses that are too challenging is only going to add to more frustration in their lives. My goodness, I went to an interview and some kid I'm talking to had failed English grade 10 5 times. And they're taking it again. I'm just like, there has to be a better way. Like, how are you still staying in school and not giving up? Like 5 times because she needed to take this grade 10 English course. So again, I mean, it's way beyond what they can do. It's like, you know, maybe some of them at this time were just learning how to hold like pencils and to, you know, figure out the process for being in an indoor school and how washrooms work and all of that. And I mean, it was asking a little much for many of these kids. Peru, do you want me to stop at this point? I promised I'd take a break.
That sounds good. That sounds good, Jan.
Okay, so how long would you like? Because I can just keep going, but I will give you a break. But I don't know how long you folks need. 5 minutes?
I was thinking of 5 minutes.
Okay. All right, let's take a break. I'm going to go refill my coffee and water here. And I will be back. I can come back at about 5 minutes.
Great, thanks.
I'm just going to run out here.
Chris, I don't know if it's possible if we could get Jan to turn off her notifications. It is really tough to listen to the dinging.
I'll let Chris know again. Thanks, Ari.
Thanks, Prue.
Peru, are you there?
I am, yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I had to get out of the screen again and I went to the turn off notifications again. I thought that Chris had turned it off, but it was still on. So I turned that off, so it's annoying people now, I think.
I was only able to turn it off for myself as an individual user, so you can do the same thing on the camera that you're talking into, Jan, on that computer.
Yeah,
top
I've
right
done
on
it.
the vertical dot.
Yeah, I've gone through and I just left the raised hand notification to come up, and I've turned off every audio notification. So
that ought to do it then. Yeah.
I sure hope so, because I think I'm irritating everybody. I'll be right back.
I'll test it right now. Alexandria just did, and she added a message and it didn't ding, so I think we're good.
So we're good? Okay, good.
Do you want to suggest that, Chris, to everyone when they come back?
Sure, I saw it in the chat box. I'll put the note in the chat box again, and you can raise it when we return from break.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Chris. So I just wanted to let everybody know you can disable the notifications, but for yourself, you go to options, settings, notifications, and then toggle off. And Chris thanking Robin for that tip. So I hope that that will help with the notifications. I know it's getting annoying with all of them coming on, but hopefully that will work.
Okay, do we have everybody back? Probably, I can get going.
I think you can proceed, Jan.
Okay, great. So I'm going to move you now through sort of this sort of next sort of phase, which is really talking about best practices of supporting integration of refugee children and youth, and career development support, and role for Canadian youth, and intercultural competence, and practical strategies. And really, I think many of you have probably seen this book, or you have a copy of the book. It's a open access resource, so you can download this from the CERIC, which is CERIC website. You can just type in Jan Stewart, Bridging Two Worlds, and you can get a copy of this. You can download the PDF. So what we wanted to do is, we were funded by SHRC to do the research. So we wanted to provide sort of an open access resource for people so that we could get stuff into their hands. And actually it's worked really well, because you know, you can easily send it to somebody, and people are now doing this, some of the work around the world, which is quite interesting for me to kind of see the quick dissemination, knowledge mobilization, whatever you want to call it. But and people contributing, you know, stories about how they use different activities. So that's been pretty exciting. Just very quickly, the phases, and I'm not gonna really spend time on this, because I think probably people in schools just want to get down to sort of, what do we do with this and how do we make sense of it. But we did interviews with participants. We talked to school and community, 218 people in 3 different provinces, you know, administration, EL, teachers, yourselves, people like you. And then we pulled the data from the 3 sites, and we established we created lessons and strategies. And then we had focus groups in 3 sites across Canada, St. John's, Winnipeg, Calgary. And then we developed policy recommendations together, like EAL training for all teachers was one of them. And then there's a list of policy recommendations in the book. And then we finalized a curriculum and delivered the curriculum, and we still deliver the curriculum in summer institutes and different postgrad and undergrad courses. So what I want to just explain is, in the research, we talked about the importance of training teachers, and we were building from those interviews and, you know, conversations we had with people. They identified certain themes, and you can see them here along the left, which is conflict awareness, social determinants of health, peace and sustainability. These were all areas that they felt teachers wanted training in, and they were teachers, so they said, we want to understand all of these ideas. So then what we did with these 9 thematic areas is we built lessons to address those. So we built 30 lessons that fit into the various different thematic areas. In terms of what that looks like, I'm going to just walk you through one lesson, just to give you a bit of a sense of what I'm talking about, if maybe you're not familiar, or just to kind of see how we would use it. I'm walking you through it as opposed to doing it with you. So just so you know, there's this framework that exists out there. It's called the Blueprint for Life Work Design. And I don't know if you folks have seen it or anything, but here it's a cross Canada, I guess, guide for career development. But it fit really well with what we wanted to do. Like, if you look at these themes, there's these core competencies that are listed in the life work design that actually fit for us, and that we would then be able to, I think they're not on this one, but I think they were actually ways that we could use an existing framework and build lessons to fit that. So you can understand here, like competency 2 and competence 2.3 and 2.2 was about developing productive interactions with clients, communicating effectively. So what we did is we found an existing framework, and then we plugged in our different activities to fit an existing framework. Because why reinvent the wheel? We were more interested in developing teacher lessons for, for professional development purposes or what have you. So we just used something that was there already, and we could see that in these different competencies, we were addressing theme number 1, which was conflict awareness, and theme number 3, peace and sustainability. So in this particular one, we had the teachers would listen, they would watch a YouTube video called The Enemy, a book about peace. And then we would do a lesson. So that's kind of like the activation activity. And I'm going to give you a bit of a sense of that. I have a little clip. I won't show the whole thing, but it's a little clip from the video. And so here you can kind of get a sense of it.
Look, do you see 2 holes? Look more closely. Do you see the soldiers in those holes? They are enemies. The Enemy, a book about peace. Written by David Khalid and illustrated by Serge Locke. The enemy is there, but I have never seen him. Every morning I shoot at him, then he shoots at me. We both stay hidden the rest of the day, waiting. Even when I'm hungry, I wait. I do not make a cooking fire. The enemy could sneak up when I'm not looking and kill me. But sometimes I am so hungry, I light my fire. As soon as I do, the enemy lights his. Except for hunger, the enemy and I have nothing in common. He is a wild beast. He does not know mercy. I know this because I read it in my manual. A long time ago, on the first day of the war, we were given a manual and a gun. The manual tells us everything about the enemy. It says that we must kill him before he kills us. If he kills us, he will also kill our families and our pets, burn down our forests, even poison our water. The enemy is not a human being. Sometimes I think the others have forgotten us. Maybe the war is over and no one remembered to tell us. Or maybe the world does not exist anymore. Maybe we are the last 2 soldiers fighting. Maybe whichever one of us survives will win the war. I have almost nothing to eat. Once I nearly caught a lizard that came close to my hole. Then I thought, if he sees me eating a lizard, the enemy will think I am desperate. Luckily, there is water. Well, I must be watchful. The enemy could poison it when I'm not looking. At night, there are lots of stars above my home. I wonder if the enemy sees them too. Maybe if he looked up at them, he would understand that war is pointless and it must stop. But I can't be the first to stop fighting because he would kill me. I would not kill him if he stopped first because I am a man. I am not a beast. It is raining again, and I hate the rain. The war needs to end because I cannot stay in this hole any longer. Last night, the beating of the rain kept me awake. As I sat, I thought that soon there won't be a moon. If I leave my hole then, the enemy won't be able to see me. I thought soon the war could end. At last it is time. I put on disguise number 3, the bush, and leave. It is chilly, but the disguise keeps me warm. I crawl toward the enemy's hole to surprise him. I am going to kill him. Then the war will be over and I can go home to my family. I have made a mistake. There are lions at night and they can see in the dark. I just spotted one and must stay still. I am lucky the lion is leaving. At last I reach the enemy's hole, but no one is here. He must be here. His things are here. There are pictures of his family. I wasn't expecting him to have a family. And what's this? A manual just like mine. But there is a difference. In this one, the enemy has my face. This manual is full of lies. I'm a man, not a monster. I am not the one who started this war. It is near dawn, and there is no sign of the enemy. Suddenly, I know where he is. He is in my hole. He tried to sneak up on me to end the war. Now I can't leave his hole. If only he would send me a message saying, "Let's end the war now," I would agree to it right away. So what is he waiting for? I am tired of waiting. There are clouds in the sky. It is going to rain again, and I hate the rain. I write a message on a handkerchief and put it in a plastic bottle. I close the bottle, aim carefully, and throw it. I hope my bottle falls in his hole. The Enemy, a book about peace, by David Khalil and illustrated by Serge Bloch.
Okay, so I wanted to show the rest just because I thought it would be better than having me give you the Jan version of how that ended. So this video is a bit dark, but we use it then, with teachers. You could probably use it with upper level students, high school students. But, thinking about the enemy, thinking about the Rwandan genocide, about, watch the BBC summary on the Rwandan genocide. What parallels can you draw? And really using this as a compare and contrast and what are the similarities? What is analogous to situations in the world today where we, think about groups as being the other. And I think this lesson in an actual group of teachers or consultants, or doing this even for real with a group like yourselves, you would be able to really see the ability to expand it, to adapt it to meet your needs. Maybe there's a different video that's more appropriate. There's, to suit your environment or your audience. But for now, this was the middle section would be after the activation exercise, you would do the application and then move to assessment and looking at discussions using Venn diagrams and the individual people's participation in the different activity. So it's an example of a lesson that we would then use with teachers. And so it's just one of. This would be another one here where it's really, again, talking about diversity, thinking about resources, appropriate sources to support students. We have a list of refugee narratives that we often use. And the reason we use them is because they're a very positive story. They're not always negative. Certainly challenges are talked about, but not, focused on, and more so resilience and strength factors are discussed. So this would be an example of a lesson that you could do, with a group of teachers as like a PD activity, building or thinking about refugee characteristics, building empathy for and respect for differences and experiences others have had. So I'm not going to go into great detail here, but This is a link to the actual document. You could also just find it on, you could just type in Building Hope, and you can get, I think there's 13 different narratives. And when I'm in real life, I have them all laminated on paper, and we give each group one, and we just really talk about some of the positive protective factors that people experience in them. So really just keeping the group really focused on the positive and the resilience, and not always focusing on what's bad. The refugee case study activity, lesson 11, again, is using these case studies and then building sort of more cultural competency. What can we think about common characteristics that students have experienced? So this brings us to the second breakout room. And before you left the last time, I forgot we could use our cell phones and just take a picture of this, just if you want the guiding questions for a discussion. This isn't gonna, I'm not gonna give you a lot of time, particularly if we have issues with technology on the end of hearing each other. But, you know, why do people tell stories? And this moves us back from the case study, you know, activity, but really thinking about storytelling as a tool for self-expression and healing, and thinking about a technique or a successful example of storytelling that you have used and maybe you're willing to share with the group. So, and then after we do the breakout group, I'm going to walk you through a lesson about artifact storytelling. So I'm going to ask Chris if you could please, sir, flip us to our breakout rooms again, about the same size. And I'm going to see you folks in about 7 minutes. I'll give you time to actually think about the questions and then maybe share an example or technique that you've used, because I think that's really where we're going to hear about some of these great ideas, because I know you're all there with some awesome ideas that you could share, and we could even build more repertoire for this. Okay. I'm going to jump into some rooms with you too.
Jan, I set this as an 8-minute countdown because I figured that first minute of getting into the breakout rooms would take a little bit. So
okay, good. I was panicking that everybody was gone because I didn't hear anything. So
no, it's all good. Everybody's where they're supposed to be, and it seems to be going swimmingly.
okay, I'm gonna go join a couple rooms then. I don't know how to turn this off.
Headset system, you've got the works. I can't hear you though. It doesn't say that you're muted either. Technology.
Can anybody hear me? I'm in here now. I jumped in with you guys. Kelly, I see you.
Jan, I think your audio is still on the main room. Are you in the room, or did you just join the audio?
Mics in the group, we could just use the chat. Do we kind of want to go through it question by question? So we could answer the first one, which is, why do people tell stories? Everyone can kind of weigh in on that.
Sorry. Chris, can you see why the mics don't work in any of the breakout rooms?
I just heard someone speaking in a breakout room from your audio. I don't know what room you were in, but I could hear them.
Yeah, none of them can hear each other.
Okay, stand by.
None of them. Yeah. I'm going to go try another room.
Okay.
I don't know how to get out of there.
I think we may not do another breakout room, maybe, Jan?
Yeah, it's not good, is it?
No, it's not working properly.
I don't see any system settings that are restricting mic access in breakout rooms, so it might just be individual users that haven't got their mics set up correctly. If they popped in initially, Paru, as a listen only, then they wouldn't have access to a microphone if they didn't select the microphone at the beginning.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking that as well. If they went in with listen only.
Do you know how I get out of the room now so that I can see my slides again? Not like I'm good with my main computer, but in terms of getting my side computer off.
I think in the top of the breakout room panel, there's an arrow that takes you back. Do you see that?
No. No, I don't have an arrow.
And if you click the breakout rooms, can you see the list of breakout rooms again?
No. Maybe when it counts down, I'll get back.
We're at 3 minutes. I'm going to join a room and see what it looks like from my end.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, I said I really want to see you. I'm like, of course. Oops. Oh my gosh.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I don't know if mics worked in your individual rooms or not. I can't sort of see if I'm not seeing if I'm getting anybody here saying that it did work, but perhaps let's just kind of take a moment to reflect on some of the questions, you know, why people tell stories, the benefits.
Can you hear her? Can you hear her? She's talking and I can't.
Yeah. Maybe.
Oh, join audio. Maybe that's what's wrong. Let's see.
They can hear you, Jan.
They can hear me? Oh, okay, I heard that again. So I'm going to start talking again. Okay, so I just thought we would kind of reflect on some of these questions. Perhaps if people will be open enough to raise their hand, I can look at one screen here and then pull you out. I don't know if many of the people's mics were working, so maybe we'll try a different model for that. For the next breakout room, we'll do something different. But who'd like to comment on any of these questions?
Unknown caller.
Fiona, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, when we were talking via chat, because we didn't have a lot of mics working, but the word that kept popping up on the screen was connection. So stories, just how much they help us connect with our students and basically everyone around us. I know for me, I get so much from speaking to my students. One particular high school, I always like eat lunch when I'm at there. I'll eat lunch with the students, and that's when they kind of are sharing those personal stories with me. And I find that's really helpful with my teaching them because it helps me see the full picture and stop fixating on, you know, all the assignments they have missing but, you know, kind of seeing them as full people and knowing why some of them have the challenges that they do.
Thank you. Yes, actually, very good point. And I think just sometimes these informal, casual sit downs with students as well, you know, taking the time is when they often share things. And I also find too, when we are, you know, just sharing when they're doing an activity, right? Like if they're doing an art activity or doing something where they're just kind of busy work at a desk, that's also a good time when students are talking about things that they did in their homes or, you know, things that are important to them or, you know, what they did the last week or something, an event. All right, thank you for that. Other people maybe who have used storytelling, maybe a technique or a successful event or perhaps a stimulus activity that they use to get storytelling going? Hania.
Okay, so good. Sorry.
Okay.
What I would like to share is that for young children in particular, I found that you're right. It may be a multi-step process. For example, a slide deck on apple picking and what that looks like. Let's say where they're coming from, there are no apples. So it's part of the Nova Scotia experience. And this is also a cultural bridge to where they are currently today. And I found that, say, for a young child, after seeing all these pictures of children in orchards and apple pies and what that looks like, then we would get into a circle and tell the story and use movement, you know, picking the apples, rolling out the dough, and baking the pie, and then how many scoops of ice cream. And with children with almost no English, as in beginners, this was nevertheless communicated and understood. So we were all participating in this group story experience, and it tended to put smiles on their faces, which of course is always the goal in the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Hania. Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful example for sure of sharing and also, you know, when language is a barrier for communication, finding other ways, movement. And I also find I do an activity with Post-its, you know, like I'm a bit of a Post-it fan. If you saw my computer right now, you would like, there's Post-its all around it. So I use these things, all different colors, but they're really good for storyboarding, and they're really good for telling a story perhaps in pictures and then putting it up and sequencing it. And then there's an activity that I do where students, you know, you create the storyboard with the Post-its, and then you tell the story with music and different instruments. And so they're kind of putting a little bit of a soundtrack. Like, it's kind of old school garage band, I think, but it's an interesting way of telling a story and bringing it to life and sharing an experience. And I think, Hania, you had a really good point. Laughing, having fun. Like, that's what it's about. And certainly, even when things don't go well, like, it's okay. Like, just, you know, I mean, have fun with it. Like, it's laugh at it, you know. I mean, you're learning something or you're doing something different, and you're coming together on a common kind of goal, or, you know, using this technique to learn together. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing. Any other contributions from the audience?
Now unmuted. So Astrid was saying classroom teachers as well as administrators need support for at least some guidelines for situations in which innocent symbols or images trigger strong emotions in our students. Sometimes it's just the image of a boat or a sunrise. Nanda's saying sorry, go ahead, Jen.
No, yeah, and Nadia also said making and sharing Nova Scotian strawberry shortcake. That's funny. Astrid, I want to really talk about that, and I actually am going to talk about that as well towards the end, which I know it's like the end. We're coming to the end, but certain images can be triggers for students, and you all folks will know that. And my example was with some of the Syrian children. The teacher, the EAL teacher in their classroom had a picture of water, and many of you folks will know exactly what I'm talking about. It's talking about culture. It's water. It's blue, obviously, and there is an iceberg, and the iceberg, only part of the tip of the iceberg is sitting out of the water, and that's kind of, they're demonstrating all of the things of culture, like the characteristics of culture, like dress, language, that we see above water. And underneath is all of the other things that are much deeper and, you know, harder to, you know, to identify, like values and your, you know, long traditions and your family, you know, expectations and that type of thing. But the teachers have it in their classroom. This one teacher had it in their classroom on the wall as a poster because it's a beautiful picture. And it was to work on, you know, concept of culture and what we see and what sometimes underneath the water that we don't see, but we need to pay attention to. Well, a student was coming into the classroom and it was triggering a very traumatic response in this child. And they had crossed the Mediterranean and of course witnessed many of their family members drowned in the crossover. So again, the teacher had no idea, but this image was triggering for the student. Just like sometimes an apple could be a trigger, like, you know, the example that we heard, it could be a trigger for somebody because, you know, it was an area where that was, you know, maybe some children were conscripted into a group when they were, you know, in an apple orchard or something like this, or where fruit was growing on a tree. It can be a smell. It can be a sound. It can be a taste of something. It can be anything. Like many of the Syrian children were triggered by airplanes going over. And one of the children I interviewed said to me, I saw the eyes of the pilot as he flew over my house and bombed us. He said, I saw the eyes of the pilot and this, you know, like the smile on his face. And so for him, this was a very triggering event anytime he heard a plane. And in some of the interviews I did with children, one of the it was a child in the car, but it was a settlement worker picking up a family from the airport and driving them to rural Manitoba where they were going to be housed in temporary housing. And the child is in the van with the person, helping with reception, driving the child and the dad and the family of, I think this was the big family of 13. Unbelievable. It was a really big family, driving them to rural Manitoba. And a plane was going over, and the exact words of the child were, "Daddy, daddy, daddy, are they going to drop the bombs?" And he was scaring, was hovering. And the settlement worker, now this is not verbatim, but he was saying, no, like that is something that my children never even have to contemplate. They see a plane and they think, oh, we're going to Disneyland, we're going to see relatives, we're going to see friends, it's exciting. But this child is seeing, trauma, is seeing an experience that he or she will never forget. And so, he said to me, what do I do with that? How do I deal with this? How do I then tell this child, no, you're safe here, in all the history of Canada, the bombs have never dropped here, you'll be okay. And to actually work with that child so that he or she feels a level of safety and not in such a threatening environment anymore. So it's an example of sort of a trigger response. And some of the work I did earlier was really about what do we do with these triggers and how do we then use a trigger and get out of the trigger, remove ourselves and kind of bring our body down, because you'll get a very escalated response like anxiety or a freezing motion. What do we do with that? So I dealt with a little bit of that in the Supporting Refugee Children book, but also in the Bridging Two Worlds, because it seems to be that teachers also want help with how to bring the child down or how to bring the individual down, the youth, how to remove them from the situation, how to say the right things and not make things worse when something like this is happening. Maybe it's something like mindfulness, maybe it's something like controlled breathing, maybe it's like imagery, but whatever it is, and this is kind of more moving into this model of trauma sensitive schools that I am currently working on, which is towards the end of today, is really what do we need to teach kids? We need to teach them these pro-social skills, these sort of coping skills. We need to also teach them how not to do the risky things, like how not to engage in risky behavior. So there's a whole host of things, from the point of where do we start with ourselves and our colleagues, then where do we go in terms of creating a safe environment for students, then where do we go with hearing something or working with the student, and then also kind of like taking a look at the process and really trying to ensure that as teachers or counselors or EAL consultants, whatever our job is, that we are making things better. And so that it's a really good question, not an easy answer, but we have to be aware of signs of distress in children. For example, we had a student coming in and every day, hoodie over the head down on the desk and not interacting. But, you got to walk up to them, like we can't just ignore that. We have to say, help me understand what's happening for you today. I notice you've come in every day this week. What's going on? Like taking the time. So it's going back to what we learned earlier today is that sense of belonging. And if we're not asking those questions and interacting with students in that way, we're not going to find out. But my warning to you is be careful when you ask, because children will tell you. And this is the issue. They will tell you. If you are a safe person and you're somebody that they trust, they will tell you a lot. And so we as caregivers and people in positions of control and power in our classroom, we need to be aware of that, because they're going to trust us with some pretty heavy duty information, and we're going to need to do something with it. And we're also going to need to help ourselves, because some of this stuff is a deep breath from us and just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to answer this. I don't know how to help this child. And you know, teachers are telling me they're up all night thinking about this kid. You know, they're not sure what to do with some of this information and whether they're going to be okay. We have to trust and we have to have hope that they will be, but it's important for us to understand where we are in all of this and to make sure that we're also looking after ourselves, which is going to move me into the next section here. One of the other lessons, and probably I will skip this one. It's a fun activity to do, and I Zoomified it, which means I took it from the real to how we could use this in the technology way. So we're not going to go into breakout rooms. You're like, oh goodness, thank goodness, because it's like my microphone doesn't work. I'm going to walk you through what I do instead of us doing it, just for the sake of time and the sake of the technology and switching back. So you can see some pictures here that I just pulled off randomly from Once Upon a Picture there. What I do in a group is we do some artifact storytelling. And in some cases with students, I will be very choosy about which objects I put down. And I've bought all these different kind of kits, and I bought all these different story stimulus things. I've got one that is a set of 5 different balls, and on each, it's like a soccer ball, and you know how the soccer balls have the little sections to it. On each of the sections, there's a sentence starter. And you throw the ball to somebody. It's a softball, so you don't hurt them. But it lands, and wherever your thumb lands on the ball when you catch it is the answer that you need to provide, or the story that you tell. Tell a story about your first day of school that you remember. Tell a story about your favorite thing to eat. Something that's just getting people going and happy. Back to my original warning here is be careful what you ask for, because sometimes people will maybe bring out a very personal story. So you need to be probably warning the group that in this type of setting, you know, if you have something really personal to share, you'd want them to share it in more of a private environment, you know, that type of thing. But in most cases, it's a very benign activity, and people are talking about foods that they like and places they enjoy going to, and so it's not you know, kind of a dangerous activity to do, but you need to be prepared in case it does kind of sneak in. In this activity, I ask people in the group to pull from their purse or whatever's close to them. I'm in my office. Maybe I pull, I've always had my Post-its. You know, I pull in various different things that I see in my office. I try to get groups maybe just to pull one item out of their purse or their backpack or their pockets or on their desk, whatever, and lay it down in the center. And the group then composes a story based on those artifacts or those items. And so it can be a story that tells a lesson. It can be a story that, you know, has a moral, teaches a lesson, like a lesson, a moral. It can be a story about their culture. It can be a story about them personally. It can be a story that's funny. Back to, you know, our original comment from our participant was make it fun. It can be a fun story. It can be silly. And so this is always a good time in my presentation where we can actually do some, you know, laughing and having fun together. And it, you know, I'm always amazed, pardon me, about how creative a group of teachers can be when just thrown down 5 different crazy objects in front of them, and what kind of story. And sometimes the object can be actually that object and used in that way, or it can be a fake object, or an object, say that, you know, is something like this, which is like a AirPod holder, but it's actually, you could say it's a, you know, a capsule, and in the capsule are these 2 things, and you make it up, right? You're creative. So you can create something different for those objects. So what I was going to do is give you these 6 pictures and just say in your group, build me a story. Come up with something that you know, in any order, like you can see umbrellas, you can see this person floating almost like a Mary Poppins with the, I think that's the moon beside them, or they're up in the planet somewhere with meteors going down. The rabbit, like, looks like the Alice in Wonderland with the clock, a little Tweety bird in the middle. I don't think that's Peggy's Cove, is it? I don't know what that is. I don't think so, but it's a lighthouse for sure. So again, you know, if anybody has this desire to build us a story very quickly, I will wait for you. I don't see anyone in the chat. Anybody up for it? I'm really putting you on the spot now. I don't want to stress anyone out. I think everybody's just like, no, please just go on. I don't want to come up with something. I also have this, I was at an expressive arts conference, and I bought this little tiny metal tin, and in the metal tin is all of these charms. And these charms are really interesting, and they're used as stimulus starters for stories. And I found them to be also very helpful because they're different things that we wouldn't necessarily have as objects in our office or in our classroom. And they're really meaningful looking kinds of charms. They're all stainless steel. They're small. And so it's good because for little kids too, it can help them with, you know, dexterity. So there's lots of different ways that we can sort of use this kind of activity. So this is in the Bridging Two Worlds lesson number 24, artifact storytelling, and it's you can see the pages there. And again, so if you want to see more about that, it's in that area. Other areas for the thematic lessons for students, again, these are what we decided. We wanted to provide 90 lessons for students. And so what we did is went back to that original framework, and we really tried to clump in these 9 sort of thematic areas and build lessons in 3 different levels: K to 4, 5 to 8, and 9 to 12. And each of those areas we listed different strategies or activities you could use. So I won't go into detail here, but here's the thematic lesson themes. So you can see awareness of self, others, and conflict resolution, the role of peace and sustainability, career development. Again, part of, I must confess, I wasn't thinking career development as in, you know, interview skills and resume writing. It's more, what do you need to do to be successful in life? And so career development, I say, is life development. It's really not looking at, you know, jobs per se. It's really about those life skills, the soft skills. And so this particular the particular funder for me was Canadian Education Research Institute for Counseling, and they had a real focus on career development. But it actually was a good framework, because in the career development framework, it's like understanding self and others. Okay, this is perfect. This fits in really well with what we want to do. So it was just kind of a marrying of these 2 ideas and concepts that really worked for us. Again, these are the different competencies that were identified for the students. And then for each of these 11 competencies, I think I said 9 before, but I was referring to the thematic areas for the teacher lessons. The 11 competencies here for the student lessons, we built lessons for K to 4, 5 to 8, and 9 to 12 in each of these competency areas. So, you know, some I think would work better than others, but we were really trying to build something that teachers could use. Here's an example. So here you can see we have acquisition level. This is a level 3, a grade 9 to 12. And this is under competency 1, maintaining a positive self-image. And again, just different activities that we could do in each of these areas. Here is the suggestion for instruction. So you could do privilege simulation, you could do an about me, you could use a web template with self at the center and ask students to label different communities or groups they interact with. You could do a minute to win it, where you partner students up to participate in a minute to win it challenges, and you give them challenges. So again, you can kind of read more into this if you're interested. An altruistic project, tapping into students' what they've discovered about themselves in previous activities. They come up with sort of a little project about their personal strengths and interests, a role play or their goals again, and then sort of moving from there. I think I'll end that sort of section just saying that this is how the lessons are structured. It will mean more when you flip through the document. It'll make more sense, but I wanted to at least point you in the right direction for some strategies, because I find that, I don't know, after a webinar or a professional development day, I was always just like, yeah, that's great. I feel good, but I need something I can use on Monday with my students because I'm struggling with them. So I try to point people into the direction, and you may say, Jan, I thought this would work. It didn't. Or Jan, this worked really amazingly. I would do it this way. I will do this all the time. And I've seen some really interesting projects that have emerged over the years with people using ideas like this. So again, take it or leave it, but it's there for you if it's something you want. I want to move now just to kind of tie in. I want to save a little bit of time as well on for questions towards the end. And so I'm going to kind of zoom you through this a little bit. I think we have to be aware of trauma, and I want to focus specifically on trauma-informed care. It's hard for people to really understand the experiences that people inflict on each other in every day. And this is from Richard Mollica, who is the leader of the refugee program for the Global Health Refugee Trauma Program at the Harvard that I attended a few years back now. But I think this was it happens. I think we haven't had the course for a couple of years because of COVID, but we convened in Italy for a couple of weeks, and we were with experts around the world who were committed to addressing trauma and helping kids and adults who had or who were working on trauma and helping people with issues of trauma. And so what I did is went to that, and it was a year-long course. It did a whole section online as well. But it helped me really gain access to others and what they're using, and try to then take what they used on more of a medical model and turn it into more of a practitioner model, because I need stuff to help me with kids. One thing to note is just mental health was one of the most prevalent health concerns, particularly with the Syrian refugee population. And the most prevalent health concern for children ages 5 to 17 in Lebanon and Jordan. So again, I'm moving into more of the later research that I've done. Losing family members, being subject or witnessing violent acts. I interviewed some individuals who had been detained, had family members detained, and I was thankful that I was working with my interpreter and very good friend Danielle Shar from Calgary, who spoke Arabic, because once she told me what they were saying, I thought, I don't know how we got through these interviews. I really don't, based on what they're telling me. It was horrific. So being detained and tortured in some of these, and kids were just like 16, 15. One student we had in high school back when I was in a counseling position, he had been jailed and tortured for about 6 years with his father. And we didn't find out until like the teacher was asking, he hasn't spoken for 6 months. And I said, that's a problem. If he hasn't spoken for 6 months, this is a problem. We need to get some support here. And then when we called the father, he said they both had been detained and jailed for 6 years and, experienced high levels of torture and humiliation. So, the child had completely disassociated. He talked at home, but not at school. So mental health was emerging as a really pressing need. Again, just paying attention to what was happening in the world in the last few years, just the Syrian war, the deadliest for many of the children. We can see children are detained, separated from their family. We got a bigger problem brewing on the U.S. border, to be honest with you. I don't know what's going to make that change. But what's happening to children at the border, being removed from their parents and being jailed, the situation is not good at all. And so I mean, it's hard to imagine how these children are going to be in a few years after this has happened to them. And many of them have no chance of reuniting with their family. Again, they're sleeping in cells, and hundreds of them. Again, this was what we were actually, many of us were talking about in this Harvard program, was just the long-term effects of what has happened to many of these children. It's not an event, it's a response to a stressful situation. And our ability to cope is dramatically undermined. So just to kind of keep thinking, it's a response to the nervous system. It's not just this is trauma, it's how we respond to that is trauma. What we saw in many of the interviews, and in the middle section, that's a refugee camp that we were in at the Syrian border, Danya and I. We've gone a couple of times now to Beirut and driven up to the Syrian border, where there's some schools that have been, basically NGOs have gotten together and created these schools. The teachers don't have any training. They're basically given a day interview and then they teach the next day. So we were there to see if there's a way that we could build capacity with those teachers and give them some skills to help them with kids who had experienced trauma. But I mean, that's going to be a long-term kind of project for us. There's triple trauma. So again, kind of bridging that earlier work that I did with pre-migration, transmigration, there's trauma in their home country, there's trauma in a refugee camp, and then there's trauma settling into a new country. So we kind of coined this frame like this term, triple trauma, because really that's what we were seeing. Thinking too about, some of the comments from students, these are just statements. I worry about my brother a lot. He's back home. I worry that I may never see him again. The war is very violent. I wake up 2 or 3 times a night and my heart is racing. I remember the sounds. They're so frightening. The picture on the wall, this is the one about the iceberg. It scares me. It's an iceberg with water. Many people drowned. I don't like to look at this picture. When I hear loud noises at school, I worry that people are coming to hurt me. The fireworks sound like bombs. It makes my head hurt and I feel scared. Police are not safe in my country. They are to be feared. If I see them on the street, I go another way. I think a lot about my parents and how much I miss them. I am the only one left in my family. Now, these are just some random quotations from talking with some of the children from Syria. Children and youth, they're really more 15 and up. So the school can be a healing environment. The school environment is critical to the well-being of children who have refugee backgrounds. As you notice, I mean, that we've been talking about this whole morning is really the focusing on belonging and giving support, and both support to the parents and to the students, and developing kind of collaborative policies in education, public health, and social services. So really getting those mesosystems connections and microsystem connections so that we're a kind of a united front to try to address some of these challenges. When we look at trauma-specific therapy versus a trauma-sensitive school, therapy, we know, like, we're not trying to turn teachers into therapists. A therapy, you have mental health professionals, it's one-on-one support. They have focus on trauma reactions and reducing symptoms, But when we're thinking about a trauma-informed school or trauma-sensitive school, we have licensed educators and people who are working in the school who have a variety of mental health training. Some have none, but we want to try to get more training for mental health. Even if it is something as basic as mental health first aid, it's a start. Sensitivity and accommodations occurring throughout the school. Focusing in as well on, the students' educational success through emotional and physical safety, empowerment, trust, choice, and collaboration. So you can kind of see the differences here so that we can argue that, no, we're not trying to turn you into social workers or counselors. We're trying to build sort of universal supports to be more trauma sensitive. Now, I want to walk you through this model and try to give you a little bit of background. So what I did is I created this trauma-informed practice and healing-centered engagement model. And I adapted it from the Mullica, the Harvard program model that I was mentioning. Here's their model. Okay, so if you take a look at it, you can see this 11-point toolkit. And this is where we start to bring in, comments from students or when they get triggered. So here you can see the more medical model. I think it has more of a medical focus because it's diagnosing and treat and prescribing drugs. So what I did is I'm sitting there as like Teacher Jan from Canada thinking, how do I use something like this and make it useful for our teachers in Canada? So I took this model and did my own based on what I was learning there and sort of really thought about what teachers are saying and what they are actually asking for. Okay, so here's what I did. And I'm going to walk you through this so that hopefully I can bring things together into a coherent argument for you. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So you can kind of see the components. And I want to walk you through each stage, and I'll do that sort of in the next couple of slides, just so I'm organized so that you can follow. But this is the massive plan here, okay? Stage 1 has these 4 components: self-care and connection to colleagues, classroom, school climate of acceptance and cultural receptiveness, safety and trust, and recognizing. So again, this is where we create that climate of care, the number 1 stage. But what do you notice about stage 1 or step 1? Step 1 is you as educators, you as caregivers, you as people who are spending your morning listening to Jan from Winnipeg talk about issues so that you're better at helping kids. Like, this is commitment, right? You have to start with you first, because you can't walk through water without getting wet. And some people think that they can. You are by far the most helpful person for any student based on what you do and what you know and what you say. But we cannot tack on self-care and our own health and well-being at the end of a model. It should be first. So in this model, looking after yourself, looking after connections, in other words, having a support system in your school, in your division. I see a comment that came earlier. I just glance every now and then. What do we do if we only have 1 or 2 people with refugee backgrounds in our school and there isn't this big group? You've got to connect to people in this kind of seminar. We're doing that now. We're thinking about who we can connect to in terms of our district leaders, our administrators. We've got to find a system of support so that you're not alone, because we don't want to hear about people burning out and feeling like they're crying and really tapped out and can't sleep, because the content is heavy. And so you need to put yourself first, because you got to be healthy to look after people who are struggling and who are experiencing trauma and mental health issues. So my first point is self-care and connecting to colleagues. Then we look at sort of how do we create this classroom of acceptance and cultural acceptance. So, Sundar Nito, Gloria Ladsing-Billings, there's lots of really good research about cultural responsive teaching, and you folks will probably know a lot about that. It's certainly, there's more to develop in that way, but those are 2 of the people I would probably lead you to sort of get some more strategies in that area. Safety and trust is also about communicating that to your students, about building relationships, about confidentiality, telling students about how, if they do tell you something that, they're going to harm themselves or others, that you will get support to help them so that you're better at helping them. But outlining the rules of engagement, shall we say, or the terms of our agreement together is like, I will keep what you tell me confidential. No, I'm not going to tell your parents, but if you tell me something that, you're going to hurt yourself or others, then that's an example of when I would have to tell somebody. So being very transparent at the front end, but also showing that you're a trusted person in their life, and that you're not going to go to the staff room or go talk to colleagues just willy-nilly, unless you're, doing that in order to get, professional support for actually real help, but not in the gossipy kind of way. And then kind of working into the recognizing is thinking about those warning signs of maladaptive behavior, excessive stress. And so there's some links in the book to signs of distress at various developmental stages that you could also link to, so that you have maybe even charts available in like a helpful binder or whatever you want to use, an online format, some kind of link, so that you have some, you know, I'm noticing this about the student, or this is the 8th time they've talked about a stomach ache in the last month. Like, is everything okay? You know, it could be a medical issue, but it could also be sort of psychosomatic, or it could be just the stress inside of them coming out in that manner. So again, be alert, pay attention, and not ignoring these things. So that kind of is stage 1, is creating this climate of care. Now, stage 2 is actually where we're gathering facts. And sometimes it's just students are offering this information to you. It's not like you're walking up to students saying, tell me your story, because that obviously is not what we do. But sometimes they do, like approaching and explaining, like, hey, are you okay? You know, I'm there to help and protect you, but, you know, are things okay? You know, are they, do they have their immediate needs looked after? Food, water, safety, and shelter. Like, are they struggling to find a place to sleep? Are they living in a shelter with their mom and 5 siblings? This is happening in our community. So again, we've got to get more sometimes background in order to be able to support them in the right way. You know, for the student who's presenting with problems in the class or distress, signals of distress, help me understand what happened. You know, you're not coercing or pressuring that with them, but, you know, if they're head down with the hoodie on, or all these, you know, headaches or complaints of some sort, you know, we can approach them. We can say, are you okay? You know, are you going to be all right? Is there something I can do? And they may not be ready then, but you've made that inroad. You've made that connection to show that you care. And that might come, that could come 6 months later. It could come a year later. It could come 2 years later, but they won't forget that you approached them, and they won't forget that you're there when they're ready. Identifying, listening, and observing for those triggers, the tough spots or upsetting issues. So just kind of really paying attention. Like, I notice every time you walk by that iceberg picture, you know, you look kind of scared, or you kind of disassociate, like you kind of, you know, phase out a little bit. Like, are you all right? Can I take that? Like, is that bothering you? No, it's this that's bothering me. Like, this kid keeps doing whatever to me, whatever. So, I mean, getting information. Also knowing your local laws and regulations. I mean, we can't expect to do everything, but we've got to link ourselves to those people in the system, those circles, who can provide the support that we need. And I mean, if you're like the teachers in my community, they're like, yeah, great, that takes 9 months. So they're not overly positive about our support system. So it takes a long time. It also takes parental permission to you know, for underage kids to go, and sometimes they can't get it. So unfortunately, sometimes you're it. And that's a tough spot to be in, because I know the feeling of being like, this really worries me that I'm the only caring person in this kid's life right now, because I can't give him or her or them what is needed at this actual time of their life. And that is what weighs on teachers, is knowing that they're the only one, and then knowing, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? Like, this kid needs more and I can't get it. So this is where that frustration plays in. And then sort of moving into the last step is healing and support. And again, I talked a little bit about this, but reinforcing and teaching certain skills and helpful techniques, you know, maybe recommending sports, hobbies, volunteer work, spiritual work, nature, mindfulness, meditation, whatever works. Like, there's no wrong thing here. And in Moloka's work, he talks about altruism and helping others and contributing, volunteering time. And it's amazing that for some people that gives them a real sense of accomplishment and helps them work through their issues. Reducing those risky behaviors, and I touched on that already. And then, you know, maybe giving the students something to work on, like, you know, 5 times a day, I want you to say something positive, or try your circle breathing, your relaxation breathing, or your timeout. Like, give them a little app on their phone if they have one, or give them some sort of activity to do to practice controlled breathing, anything like this that can actually start them onto a healing journey that they have something to focus their energy on or focus their time on or practice so that they can build some more coping mechanisms and be independent in that, not always needing to have somebody help them. They can take some of this on themselves and have that control on their own. And then always, of course, planning to do this with the student and following up. Okay, you know what? I want you to try this for the next couple of weeks, and I'm going to check back on you and see how things are going. The last stage is really, reflecting and reviewing on you and what you're doing with the student and how you're doing, your thoughts on the situation. What do you need to know more about? What do you need to understand more clearly? What's not going well? Are you struggling with your biases? Are you not, what do you need to know more about? What do you need to do if you need to get more information? What do you maybe need to do to change? So this kind of model is really, working into trying to pull in, support for the students. You've got activities you can try to do in, say, class or small group or even independently with slight modifications. I'd like to say that, it's going to solve everything. It's not. It's a step towards making things better and also to start building more that is more helpful. In other words, if this doesn't work, try this. There are options for you to try. I think with some of the teacher development, the background information that we've discussed, the sort of theory that builds into the practical application of it, hopefully there's something there that maybe you can use in your next day or few days at your school. I'm sure there's lots of questions, or maybe I didn't go into things in as much depth for you, but I tried to cover quite a lot of ground in our 3 hours today. So I'm going to flip it back now to Peru in case there's some really good questions that we need to really look at more closely in the chat.
Thank you, Jan. So some of the comments earlier was triggers. So Remembrance Day is tough. This year, the speaker spoke about how none of us have ever known war. And then lockdown drills, hiding in the corner, having someone knock or pound on the door. Alison at Citadel High School, the EEL room at Citadel has a direct view of the helipad at the Halifax Infirmary, where the medvac helicopters land. And Nanda's saying that some of the newcomer students do not trust the police in the beginning. So if you invite a police person to the classroom, that can be a trigger, but it's a good idea to invite them to talk to class and ask them to not be in uniform, so maybe dressed casually.
Do you want me to stop and answer a couple?
Sure, yes, please.
Okay, so let's start in reverse order and we'll maybe talk about the police coming. Yeah, almost all of the students have been, feel like they have been treated unfairly by police. They're definitely, the police are seen as more of a threat in many of the countries where kids are coming from, as opposed to here where, we would teach our children to go to the police if you had a problem. Many of the refugee kids would not go. And I mean, I can tell you that my experience in South Sudan with the police is not a good experience. So I know why they are feeling threatened by police, and it's not a great feeling to be in when you don't know how you're going to get away from them or get through a checkpoint or get out of a little room that they've put you in, and you don't have very many options. So in our case in South Sudan, in the short, I think 2 weeks that we were in Juba, I think both me and Elizabeth were both taken into little rooms each where we had to buy our way out. And it's frightening. It's very frightening to have somebody with a big gun in front of you and not to know the language, and to know that if you screw up, that's not going to be good. It's not going to be a good solution. It's not going to be a good ending for you. So you've got to figure your way out. And in some cases, it was paying our way out, or smiling and just, you know, kind of pleading your case as being humanitarians and doing some work for people. I can understand why kids are scared. And checkpoints with people with guns, and just it's a very threatening environment. So transferring that here, where you have, you know, not that level of coercion, but certainly kids are talking about getting profiled, followed in stores, police. The comments from some of the kids, I actually stopped the interview, and I was speechless, and I just looked across at this kid, and I said to me, I am so sorry that this happened to you in my country. I'm embarrassed and humiliated that this happened, and I don't know what to say. It's unacceptable. And, you know, the police was saying, you're a black a-hole, like calling the kids horrible word. And these kids are going to school. Like, they're not gang members. They're just trying to finish their grade 12. Like, this is it. Calling them, go back to your own country, you black A. And I mean, and other much more severe, awful words I won't even allude to. I mean, this is a very frightening thing for kids. And sometimes kids were saying, you know, we were going to 7-Eleven to buy a phone card so I could call my family. And there was 5 of us walking together, and they stopped us and they checked all our bags. So, I mean, not all police are like this, of course. But the comments from the students made me think that we have to do some bridging with police. We need to do some sensitivity training with police. And I mean, not that this doesn't happen with our own Canadian residents, in particular, our Indigenous students are also experiencing a lot of racism and discrimination. And of course, not all police are, you know, these kinds of people who do this kind of thing. But it's, what do? Is we don't generalize, number one. Number two, we provide more training so that people are more culturally aware and understand what it means if you are a refugee, you're not a troublemaker. Number three, give opportunities for kids to interact with police. Go play soccer together. Go play hockey together. Start a police team and a student team and have them intermingling. And we did that in our Replex at our university, and it's a very positive experience. And the police are police, but they're not dressed in uniform. And then they create a relationship with the students so that they know this is what they do, and if they do need help, they can. We also have many police I interviewed in some of the junior high schools, in the middle schools. They were doing like a community liaison officer work, but you know, I don't know, like we can't assume, like in this case, this police, I visited him at work and he was very funny. He actually put caution tape around my car. He thought it was hilarious. He had kids on piggyback on his back. Like this guy was unbelievable. This guy was the nano system. This guy was just, the kids loved him. They loved him. And so, you know, the argument about defunding police and not supporting them and getting them out of schools, no, like this is not a wipeout here. Like there's some really good programs that are being, you know, are instrumental in changing some of the views that kids have. So they're not going to be scared to go see police if there is a problem. Anyway, long answer to a question. I think Remembrance Day ceremonies, I think you're going to have to prep kids a lot before them. The helicopter will be a triggering event, but I mean, what can you do in these circumstances? Like, do the students need to attend? Number two, is there something that, you know, they can have maybe a couple of, and this sounds silly, but a rock in their pocket, and every time they touch the rock, like they just, you know, have something to concentrate on, and maybe, you know, feel a smooth rock and concentrate on, you know, a rock on a beach, and use some visual imagery to try to get through that. when they see the helicopter, more talking. This is helping people. A police, like not a police, an ambulance kind of thing, but it's an ambulance that comes this way. It's helping people and more explaining, and I don't know, I think just providing as much as we can about, you know, why this is the way it is, and not leaving them on their own to try to fill in the gaps, because if they're left on their own to fill in the gaps, they're going to think the worst. And I think we need to provide more and more explanation, reasoning, assurances. And I mean, not just once, 100 times, like over and over and over until they have that on. And I see that, yeah, mistrust of police comes from their own experiences in Canada. Well, absolutely. This is what I alluded to. Like, I mean, it's even the adult teachers who came from refugee backgrounds talked about the same thing. Again, apologized for my city. I apologized. Like, and I think one of the teachers in particular, you know, he kind of bashed me when I came. He was like, you people, you all come here, you take your interviews. So what? Who cares? Like, you write your journal article, nobody reads. And I said, Mr. Razai, you know what? I'm actually going to use the words. I think you're right, but I really need to assure you that what I'm hearing from students will be told in as many ways as I possibly can, to as many audiences I possibly can, to ensure that the actual narrative is told, the story is told. And I mean, I think in his case, you know, he was a refugee. He was detained on the border, and his experience was very similar to that of the students. So I think when you hear that, you have to advocate, promote, you need to talk about, bring those stories forward, be transparent about it, and work together to solve it. And I think that sounds kind of like a lofty solution, but we can't ignore it. And there's reasons people are the way they are. They build walls, or they have just, you know, thinking that's distorted and not true. Many people have not, in our research in employment areas, like the employers were saying, I don't want to hire refugees. They talk weird. I don't always speak our language. How am I going to teach them? And then like the program put the refugee students in their business. And now these employers are saying, these people, oh my God, they're the most work ethic. I don't mean to say these people, but I'm saying this group you've sent, there's the strongest work ethic. They're now the advocates for all the refugee communities, and many of our furniture plants, our meat packing plants, the ones who are in the French fry companies, they're the ones saying, no, you need to give them a chance. That I'm like, what? You know, and meanwhile, like 6 months ago, they were saying, you know, very, you know, closed things about people. So I'm sorry, I'm running into your time again, and I just wanted to provide an answer for some of that. So I'm going to flip it over back to Peru. I do want to thank you all for your time today. I know you're kind of in and out. I wish I could interact with you, but thank you for listening to me. Thank you for your suggestions, your contributions. I don't know what you look like, but I know your names now. So thank you for everything. Hopefully someday I can come back. I have a lot of family in Halifax, so I would be happy to come back to Nova Scotia and meet you sometime. But thanks for your patience and meeting you all today.
Thank you so much, Jan. That was a really great, informative session. Sorry about the hiccups with the breakout rooms, but thank you again, Jan. That was a really very informative, wonderful session. Thank you, and thank you to everyone for attending today's professional learning session. We will be sending the recording to you, and I'll be sending out an evaluation form as well. Thanks everyone for attending today's session, and for all your comments as well.
Thank you. I see them all pouring in here. Thank you all very much for your kind words. I appreciate it. Very kind.